What if everything you know about King Edward II's is a lie? For hundreds of years, the story has been told the same way. A weak king. A brutal reign. A tragic end. But the real story, the one hidden behind the silence of old castles and dusty records, is far more disturbing than anyone ever imagined. They say Edward died in prison, that his enemies quietly got rid of him after he lost the crown. But why, then, do some old letters speak of screams? Why do others talk of secret torture? And why does one chilling tale speak of a red-hot iron used in a way too horrific to describe? For a long time, people believed it. Because it sounded dramatic. Because it seemed to match the hatred many had for him. But when you look closely, none of it adds up. The facts are broken. The records don't match. And some say, he didn't even die. This is not just a story of a king. It's a story of betrayal, of lies, and of a cover-up that may have fooled the world for centuries. It's a mystery that begins in the cold stone walls of a castle, and ends in a secret that could change how we see the past. In this video, we will break it all down. The myths, the murder, the motives, and the strange clues that have survived in hidden letters and ancient books. You'll hear the real stories. Not the ones your school books told you, but the ones that were buried, on purpose. So stay with us until the end. Because the deeper we go, the darker it gets. And by the time we reach the final truth, you may never look at history the same way again. Edward II was never meant to be a great king. He was the son of Edward I, one of England's most feared and respected rulers. His father was a warrior, a builder of castles, a man who crushed rebellions with an iron fist. People expected Edward II to be the same. But he wasn't. From the beginning, Edward seemed more interested in pleasure than power. He liked music, rowing, and building things with his hands. He was kind to animals and gave money to people he liked. But kindness didn't win wars, and it didn't keep enemies away. When he became king in 1307, many hoped he would grow into the role. Instead, he made things worse. He gave high positions to his close friend, Piers Gaveston, a man the nobles hated. Some say they were more than friends. Whatever the truth, their bond made powerful men angry. The barons felt ignored. They believed Edward was weak and foolish. They didn't trust Gaveston, who mocked them and acted above the law. Tension grew. Then it exploded. The nobles captured Gaveston. They didn't wait for a trial. They killed him. And instead of punishing them, Edward backed down. This only made him look weaker. Later, he replaced Gaveston with another favorite, Hugh Despenser. This man was even worse. He took land from others. He jailed his enemies. With Edward's support, the Despensers ruled like tyrants. The people suffered. The nobles suffered. Even Edward's wife, Queen Isabella, turned against him. England was falling apart. There were food shortages, rising taxes, and defeats in battle. The worst came in 1314, at the Battle of Bannockburn. Edward led his army into Scotland, and lost badly. It was one of the most crushing defeats in English history. His reputation never recovered. By the mid-1320s, Edward had made too many enemies. His poor decisions, his favoritism, his weakness, all of it had added up. And the people who once supported him now wanted him gone. But the way they removed him, and what they did next, would shock the world. By 1326, Edward II had lost almost everything: his power, his respect, and the trust of his own family. But the final blow came from someone he once believed was on his side: his wife, Queen Isabella. Isabella was sent to France on a political mission. But once there, she refused to return. She said she would not come back while the Despensers were in power. Many thought this was just an excuse. In truth, she had other plans, and another partner. In France, she joined forces with Roger Mortimer, a nobleman who had escaped prison in England. Together, they planned to invade. It was not just a rebellion. It was a takeover. They gathered an army. It was small, but they didn't need a large force. When they landed in England, many people joined them. Lords, knights, even commoners. No one wanted Edward on the throne anymore. Edward tried to fight back, but his support was gone. His army fell apart. His closest allies, the Despensers, were captured. Hugh Despenser the Younger was given a brutal death, hanged, drawn, and quartered in public. A warning to all. Edward fled from place to place, trying to escape, but there was nowhere left to run. In November 1326, he was caught and imprisoned. The once mighty king was now just a captive. In January 1327, he was forced to give up the crown. His 14-year-old son became King Edward III, but the boy was too young to rule alone. Isabella and Mortimer took control, acting as his protectors. As for Edward II, he was sent to Berkeley Castle, a cold, isolated place in the west of England. They said he would be kept safely there, that he would live out his days in peace. But few believed that. Too many people wanted him gone for good. He was a danger to their power. As long as he lived, he could be used to stir rebellion. Some still saw him as the rightful king, and in a world full of plots and power games, keeping him alive was a risk. Months passed. No one knew what was happening inside the castle walls. Then, in September 1327, a message was sent out. Edward II was dead. But how he died, and what really happened in that dark castle, would remain one of the most terrifying mysteries in English history. When news of Edward II's death spread, the official story was simple. He died from natural causes. No details were given. No body was shown. Just a quiet note from the crown saying the former king had passed away. But people didn't believe it. Rumors began almost at once. Whispers of murder, of torture, of a death too cruel to speak of in public. And the most chilling rumor of all, a red-hot iron used in a way so vile, it was meant to leave no trace. According to one version, the killers came at night. They pinned Edward down. Then they held a red-hot poker and forced it into his body, through the back end, so that there would be no visible wounds. The goal was clear: make sure he died in pain, but make it look clean. This story was repeated by several writers of the time. Some said his screams could be heard far beyond the castle walls. Others said the smell of burning flesh filled the air. But not everyone agreed. Some records said he was smothered. Others claimed he starved to death. Some even suggested poison. The truth? It was lost in the shadows. What's strange is how the people in power reacted. There was no open investigation, no public mourning. Even his burial felt rushed. A quick funeral, a sealed coffin, and silence from the court. Almost like they wanted to move on fast, before anyone could ask too many questions. But why? Why would they cover up his death? And why use such a terrible method? One reason could be fear. If the death looked peaceful, people might accept it and move on. If it looked like murder, it could cause unrest. The people might rise up, or foreign powers might use it as an excuse to attack. So the safest path was secrecy. Another reason? Revenge. Edward had made many enemies. He had insulted nobles, punished rivals, and stood by men like the Despensers. Some believe his death was not just planned, it was personal. But no matter which version you believe, one thing is clear: Edward II's death was no accident. It was brutal. It was planned. And those behind it made sure the truth stayed buried. Or so they thought. Because years later, a strange letter would surface, and it would turn everything upside down. The death of Edward II shocked people, but the silence that followed was even stranger. No one was punished. No one was blamed. And those in power acted like nothing had happened. That's when the real question began to form: who had the most to gain from his death? At the top of the list were Queen Isabella and Roger Mortimer. They had taken over England. They ruled in the name of young Edward III. But as long as Edward II was alive, their rule was not safe. Some people still saw him as the true king. Others could use him to start a rebellion. Killing him removed that risk. It cleared the path for Isabella and Mortimer to hold power without fear. But they couldn't be seen as murderers. That would turn the people against them. So if they ordered his death, they needed it to look natural, or hide it completely. There were also rumors that the new rulers had promised Edward safety. If true, they broke that promise. But no one dared speak out. Mortimer had taken control of the courts. He controlled the flow of information. And those who questioned him often disappeared. Even young Edward III, now king in name, was kept in the dark. He was only 14. He had no power of his own. He couldn't question what happened to his father. Not yet. There's another reason the truth may have been hidden: the crown itself. England had just gone through a time of chaos. Civil war, invasion, and public executions. The new leaders didn't want more unrest. If the people believed their former king was murdered in cold blood, they might turn violent. There could be uprisings, bloodshed, civil war all over again. So, a quiet story was better. A peaceful death, a sad goodbye, and then silence. But history has a way of bringing hidden things back to the surface. And soon, stories began to spread. Letters, eyewitness claims, strange sightings, all suggesting one terrifying possibility: Edward II might not have died at all. For years, people accepted the story of Edward II's death, but slowly, bits of evidence began to surface. And each piece made the story stranger. The first clue came from the way his death was reported. Some records said he died on September 21, 1327. But others gave no date at all. Some reports said he was buried quickly. Others said his body wasn't seen. In fact, no one outside the castle ever confirmed it was really him. Then came the letters. One of the most famous was the Fieschi letter, written by a priest named Manuel Fieschi. In it, he claimed that Edward II did not die at Berkeley Castle. He said Edward escaped, that a body double was killed in his place, and that the Real Edward lived in secret for years. Fieschi said Edward fled to Ireland, then to Europe. He even claimed to have met him in Italy. The letter gave detailed steps of Edward's escape, names, places, and dates. It didn't read like a rumor. It read like a report. Many historians dismissed the letter at first. They said it was fake, but others weren't so sure. Why would a church official risk writing such a bold story? And how did he know so many small facts about Edward's life? Facts that only someone close to the crown could know. There were also strange sightings. Years after Edward's death, some people claimed they saw a man who looked like him. In 1330, a man known as William the Welshman appeared in Germany. He spoke like a noble. He acted like a king. And some said he was Edward. Even stranger, a few members of the royal court seemed to believe it. Some gave him money. Others tried to keep him hidden. Edward III even gave quiet rewards to men linked to the Fieschi story. Why would he do that, unless he knew the truth? Modern historians have studied the evidence. Some believe the letter is real. Others still doubt it. But most agree on one thing: the way Edward's death was handled was odd. Too many secrets. Too many gaps in the story. Too many powerful people who had reasons to lie. So we are left with two options. Either Edward II died in agony at the hands of his enemies, or he escaped and lived in hiding while the world believed he was dead. But both paths lead to the same question: why did they work so hard to cover it up? As more stories came to light, one thing became clear: the death of Edward II was no simple event. It was surrounded by doubt, silence, and fear. And over time, new theories began to grow, each one stranger than the last. One theory says the murder never happened, that the body buried in Edward's tomb wasn't his at all. Some believe a loyal servant or prisoner was killed in his place. The killers were paid off. The body was dressed as the king, and no one ever looked inside the coffin to check. Another theory is that Edward was moved before the murder could happen. Some say loyal guards, still faithful to the king, helped him escape from Berkeley Castle. He may have lived quietly in Wales or across the sea in France. The Fieschi letter supports this idea. It describes how Edward escaped through tunnels, changed clothes with a servant, and was smuggled out at night. It even gives the names of people who help him. It sounds unbelievable, but it's strangely detailed. There's also the story of William the Welshman, the man who appeared in Germany a few years later. He looked and spoke like Edward. Some say he even had the same habits. He was treated with great respect by local leaders. He claimed to be a man who had lost everything, but wouldn't say his name. When King Edward III heard about him, he didn't have him killed. Instead, he ordered silence. Some think the young king had learned the truth and didn't want to bring shame to the crown or his mother, Isabella. If Edward II had survived, it would have caused chaos. People might question Edward III's rule. Nobles who supported Isabella and Mortimer could be blamed. The entire kingdom could fall apart. So maybe the best option, for everyone, was to let the mystery remain, to keep the past buried. to pretend that Edward II had died, and make sure no one looked too closely. But secrets never stay buried forever. And the more we search, the more cracks we find in the official story. What really happened to Edward II? Was he murdered in the most brutal way imaginable? Or did he vanish into the shadows, watching as the world forgot his name? The answer may still be out there, hidden in a forgotten letter, a sealed tomb, or a truth no one dared to tell. Whether Edward II died in agony or escaped into exile, his story didn't end with his disappearance. In many ways, it had only just begun. The people who took power after him didn't stay in control for long. Just 3 years after Edward's supposed death, his son, Edward III, turned against those ruling in his name. In 1330, at the age of 17, Edward III staged a bold coup. He had Roger Mortimer arrested. Mortimer was tried, found guilty of treason, and executed. Queen Isabella, Edward's mother, was spared, but removed from power and kept under watch. Some say Edward III acted not only out of a hunger for power, but also to avenge his father. But there's a strange twist. If Edward II had truly been murdered, why didn't his son speak more openly about it? Why wasn't there a public trial or justice for the crime? Why, even years later, did the crown keep quiet? Some believe Edward III knew the truth, that his father had escaped, that the murder story had been faked, and that bringing it back into the light would damage the fragile peace he was trying to keep. Over time, the story of Edward II's death became more legend than fact. Writers, poets, and chroniclers added their own twists. Some made him a victim of love and betrayal. Others turned his death into a warning of what happens when kings grow weak and enemies grow bold. His tomb still stands in Gloucester Cathedral, a grand monument. Stone carvings, Latin words praising a king who died a martyr. But no one knows for sure who lies inside. Was it really Edward? Or someone else? What we do know is this: Edward II's life and death changed how future kings ruled. It showed how dangerous the crown could be, how power could turn friends into traitors, and how even a king could vanish without a trace. Today, his story still haunts the pages of history. A reminder that not every royal death is as simple as it seems, and that the truth, once buried, may never return. So, what really happened to King Edward II? Was he murdered in the most brutal way a human can imagine? Silenced forever by those who feared him? Or did he escape, stripped of his crown but clinging to life, watching from the shadows as others ruled in his name? We may never know for sure. The records are broken, the stories conflict, and the people who knew the truth took it with them to the grave. But what makes Edward's story truly disturbing isn't just how he might have died. It's how easily a king could disappear, how power could shift hands with lies, and how history could be rewritten, not by facts, but by fear. We're left with a question that still echoes today. Was Edward II truly weak, or was he the victim of a game too cruel for anyone to survive? And more importantly, what other truths have been buried, just like his? If you found this story gripping, dark, and worth thinking about, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment with your thoughts or questions, and subscribe to the channel. There are more forgotten stories like this, hiding in the corners of history, waiting to be uncovered.